Have you ever felt a presence behind you, even though you knew you were alone? Have you ever heard a whisper in your ear when no one was there? What if the things that go bump in the night aren't just figments of your imagination, but something far more sinister? Something that has been waiting, lurking in the shadows just out of sight for years. What if the stories of haunted houses and cursed objects weren't just tales to spook children, but warnings that we've all been ignoring? This is the story of how I discovered that the things we fear the most are not just real. They're closer than we think. It all started when I decided to move into a new place. After years of living in crowded apartments, I craved space, solitude, and a fresh start. I found a house in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. It was old but charming, with tall windows, creaky wooden floors, and a large overgrown garden. The price was unbelievably low, almost too good to be true. But eager to start this new chapter in my life, I ignored the unease that tugged at the back of my mind. The first few weeks were peaceful. I spent my time unpacking, decorating, and getting familiar with the new surroundings. The neighbors were kind but distant, as if they were used to people coming and going from this house. I thought nothing of it, chalking it up to the quiet nature of the neighborhood. One evening, as I was settling in with a book and a cup of tea, I heard something odd, a faint scratching noise coming from the attic. My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly brushed it off, convincing myself it was just a mouse or some other small creature. After all, the house was old, and old houses had their quirks. Still, the noise continued, growing louder each night until it was impossible to ignore. One night, curiosity got the better of me. Armed with a flashlight, I decided to investigate the attic. The narrow staircase creaked under my weight as I ascended, the air growing colder with each step. At the top, I hesitated, the door to the attic looming before me. A part of me wanted to turn back, to run down those stairs and never return. But another part, the rational part, urged me to face my fear and find out what was causing the noise. I opened the door, and the musty smell of dust and decay hit me immediately. The attic was cluttered with old furniture, boxes of forgotten belongings, and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. My flashlight beam flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room. I stepped forward cautiously, listening intently for the sound that had brought me here. Then I saw it, a large old trunk pushed into the far corner of the attic. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, made of dark wood with strange symbols carved into its surface. The scratching noise was coming from inside the trunk. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached, a cold sweat forming on my forehead. I kneeled beside the trunk and with trembling hands slowly lifted the lid. Inside the trunk was a collection of old photographs, letters, and strange weathered objects. The photographs were black and white, depicting a family that looked as if they had lived a century ago. There was something unsettling about their faces, though. Something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Their eyes seemed to follow me, and their expressions were a mix of fear and sorrow. Beneath the photographs, I found the source of the noise. It was a small, intricately carved wooden box, no bigger than a jewelry case. The scratching had stopped the moment I touched it, but the box was cold, unnaturally so. I tried to open it, but it was locked tight. There was no keyhole, no obvious way to open it, yet I felt an overwhelming urge to do so. The letters in the trunk were written in a language I didn't recognize. The paper was brittle and the ink had faded, but I could make out a few words here and there, enough to realize that the letters were warnings. They spoke of something dark, something that should never be disturbed. My pulse quickened as I realized that whatever was inside the box wasn't just a keepsake, it was something far more dangerous. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house changed. The air grew heavier, the shadows darker. I started hearing whispers, faint at first but growing louder each night. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, voices overlapping, speaking in that same strange language from the letters. I couldn't understand them, but their tone was clear, angry, desperate, pleading. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt a presence in the room with me, watching, waiting. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart racing, the whispers echoing in my ears. My once peaceful home had become a place of dread, and I knew it all stemmed from that box in the attic. I tried to leave the house, but something always pulled me back. It was as if the house itself had a hold on me, refusing to let me go. I would drive away only to find myself turning back, compelled to return. The box haunted my thoughts, an obsession I couldn't shake. I had to open it, to understand what it was and why it was affecting me so deeply. One stormy night, after hours of pacing and debating with myself, I finally gave in. I climbed the stairs to the attic, the house groaning and creaking around me as if it were alive, aware of what I was about to do. The rain pounded against the roof, and thunder rumbled in the distance, adding to the sense of impending doom. I retrieved the wooden box and brought it downstairs to the living room. The whispers grew louder as I held it, the voices now frantic, almost screaming. My hands shook as I set the box on the coffee table and grabbed a hammer and chisel from my toolbox. With a deep breath, I forced the chisel into the seam of the box and struck it with the hammer. The wood splintered, and a gust of icy wind rushed through the room, extinguishing the candles I had lit. The whispers reached a fever pitch, and for a moment I thought I saw shadowy figures moving in the corners of my vision. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I struck the box again and again until it finally cracked open. The moment the box opened, a wave of darkness washed over the room. It was as if the light itself had been swallowed, leaving me in a suffocating black void. I heard a low guttural growl, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a primal, overwhelming fear, a fear I had never known before. Inside the box was a small, tattered doll, its face twisted into a grotesque grin. It was covered in what looked like dried blood, and its eyes, oh, those eyes, were black, empty voids that seemed to pull me in. I couldn't look away, even as I felt my sanity slipping away. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a deep, resonant voice that filled the room. It spoke in that same ancient language, but this time I understood. The voice told me of a curse placed on the family in the photographs, a curse that had claimed their lives and would now claim mine. The doll was the vessel for a malevolent spirit, one that had been trapped for centuries, waiting for someone foolish enough to release it. I had been that fool. From that night on, my life became a living nightmare. The doll haunted me, appearing in different rooms despite my efforts to get rid of it. I burned it, buried it, even tried to destroy it with fire, but it always returned, unscathed, waiting for me in the dark. The voice never left me, whispering in my ear, filling my mind with visions of death and despair. I could no longer sleep, eat, or think clearly. My once peaceful life had crumbled into chaos, and I was a shell of the person I used to be. The neighbors began to avoid me, their kind smiles replaced with looks of pity and fear. I knew they could see the darkness that had taken hold of me. One night, in a desperate attempt to break the curse, I returned to the attic. I searched through the trunk again, hoping to find some clue, some way to reverse what I had done. But all I found were more photographs of the same family. But now their faces were twisted in agony, their eyes hollow, their bodies lifeless. And then I saw it, a photograph of myself, standing in the attic holding the box. My face was pale, my eyes wide with terror, the same look of despair that I had seen in the other photographs. I dropped the picture and stumbled back, my mind reeling. How was this possible? Who had taken this photograph? And why was I now a part of this cursed history? The days blurred together, each one more terrifying than the last. The doll's presence grew stronger, its influence over me more oppressive. I could feel it watching me, its cold eyes boring into my soul. I knew I had to end this, once and for all, before it consumed me entirely. I researched everything I could about curses, spirits, and ancient rituals, hoping to find a way to banish the doll. I visited libraries, spoke to occult experts, and even reached out to paranormal investigators, but no one had ever encountered anything like this. The more I learned, the more I realized how hopeless my situation was, but I couldn't give up. Not yet. I had one last idea, a ritual I had discovered in an old dusty book hidden in the darkest corner of the library. It was dangerous, and there was no guarantee it would work, but it was my only hope. On the night of the full moon, I gathered the necessary items: candles, salt, herbs, and a ceremonial dagger. I drew a circle of protection in the living room, placed the doll in the center, and began the ritual. The air grew thick with tension, the shadows around me shifting and swirling as if they were alive. As I chanted the ancient words, the doll began to move, its limbs twitching, its head turning to face me. The room grew colder, the darkness closing in, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I poured all my energy into the ritual, determined to rid myself of this curse once and for all. The doll let out a blood-curdling scream, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. It was as if something was being torn from me, something vital. The room shook, the candles flickered, and for a moment I thought I had succeeded. But then the darkness erupted from the doll, engulfing the room, and I was thrown to the floor. The last thing I heard before I lost consciousness was that deep, resonant voice laughing. When I awoke, the house was silent. The candles had burned out, and the room was dark, save for the faint light of the moon filtering through the window. The doll was gone, and the air felt lighter, as if the oppressive presence had finally lifted. I staggered to my feet, my body aching, my mind foggy. Had the ritual worked? Had I finally broken the curse? I wanted to believe it, but deep down I knew something was wrong. The house was too quiet, too still. I made my way to the attic, my heart pounding in my chest. The door creaked open and I stepped inside, half expecting the doll to be waiting for me. But the attic was empty, the trunk gone, the photographs and letters vanished. It was as if they had never existed. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I turned to leave, I saw it. A shadowy figure standing at the top of the stairs, its form indistinct, but its presence unmistakable. The same presence that had haunted me for weeks. The same malevolent force that had been trapped in the doll. It hadn't been banished. It had been set free. I fled the house that night, leaving everything behind. I couldn't stay there, not with that thing still lurking in the shadows. I moved to a new city, changed my name, tried to start over, but the memories of that night haunted me. The whispers returned, quieter now, but still there, a constant reminder that the darkness hadn't let me go. I began to research the history of the house, desperate to find some explanation, some way to finally rid myself of this curse. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. The house had belonged to the family in the photographs, a family that had been tormented by a malevolent spirit for generations. The spirit was bound to the doll, passed down through the family as a way to contain it, but the curse was strong, and one by one the family members succumbed to its influence, their lives ending in tragedy. I wasn't the first person to find the box in the attic, and I wouldn't be the last. The curse was a cycle, repeating itself over and over, claiming new victims each time, and now I was part of that cycle. It's been years since I left that house, but the darkness still follows me. The whispers are a constant presence, growing louder with each passing day. I see shadows in the corners of my vision, feel cold hands brushing against my skin in the dead of night. I know it's only a matter of time before the spirit comes for me, just as it came for the family before me. I've tried everything to break the curse, but nothing works. The spirit is bound to me now, and there's no escaping it. I've considered returning to the house, facing the darkness head-on, but I'm too afraid. I know that once I go back, there's no turning back. The spirit will claim me, just as it has claimed so many others. So I write this as a warning to anyone who finds themselves drawn to an old, abandoned house, to anyone who hears whispers in the night, to anyone who finds a strange, cursed object in the attic. Leave it alone. Don't let curiosity get the better of you, because once you open that box, once you unleash that darkness, there's no going back. And one day it might come for you too. I've moved again, to a place far away from the city, far away from any reminders of the house. I've changed my name, my appearance, trying to start over once more. But the darkness is still with me, lurking just out of sight. I know it's only a matter of time before it finds me again. Sometimes I think about the people who will move into that house after me. Will they find the box? Will they open it as I did? Or will they heed the warnings, leave it alone and escape the curse? I can only hope that they do, that they don't make the same mistake I did. But deep down I know the truth. The curse is too strong, too ancient. It will continue as it always has, claiming new victims, spreading its darkness. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. All I can do is wait. Wait for the day when the whispers grow too loud to ignore, when the shadows consume the light, when the darkness finally claims me. And when that day comes, I'll be ready. Or at least I'll try to be.